Okay, get this. You've got this land, right, used for decades by U.S. military bases in South Korea. Now it's finally coming back to the community.
Hmm.
Sounds like a massive opportunity, especially in a place like Uijeongbu, where Camp Red Cloud CRC is a big one.
A really significant site, yeah.
But instead of boom, opportunity,
Yeah.
the land's stuck. It's sitting behind what our sources today are calling a 1 trillion wall.
And that phrase, that 1 trillion wall, that really captures the heart of the problem here.
Right.
When these bases get returned, the land itself, the ownership, it goes back to the national government. We're talking the Ministry of National Defense.
Okay, so not the city.
Not the city, no. And for Uijeongbu to actually use that land for its citizens and, build parks, public spaces, whatever the city has to buy it.
Buy back from their own national government.
Essentially, yes. And the price tag for a major site like CRC, the estimate is, well, it's almost 1 trillion won.
Wow, 1 trillion.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's an absolutely staggering figure. And the sources point out Uijeongbu is a local government with pretty low financial independence.
So 1 trillion isn't just a hurdle, it's
It's described as practically impossible. It creates this structural dilemma. You've got valuable land, opportunity land, just sitting there, locked away.
because the city just can't afford the entry fee, basically.
Exactly. They can't afford to buy it, let alone develop it. So it often just sits there, neglected.
Okay, so that's the massive problem. But this is where it gets interesting, right? The sources say the citizens are responding in a really unexpected way.
Yeah, this is the surprising part. Faced with this, huge financial and bureaucratic wall, the citizens aren't primarily going down the road of, say, loud protests or really confrontational tactics.
Which you might expect.
Right. Instead, they're framing their approach around contribution and service.
Contribution and service. How does that work against a 1 trillion problem?
Yeah.
It's different.
It is very different and quite strategic, it seems. The sources point to this one specific, almost symbolic action citizens doing plogging.
Plugging. You mean like jogging and picking up trash?
Exactly. Picking up trash, jogging, right there at the former Camp Red Cloud site itself.
Okay.
It's quiet, it's physical, it's an act of care, but it's also sending a very clear message, a very firm one.
All right, let's unpack this then. We've got this enormous financial block, this systemic issue, and the community's first move is cleaning. How does picking up litter start to tackle a 1 trillion price tag?
Good question.
So our mission for this deep dive, let's dig into these sources. We need to understand this unique citizen-led thing. Why contribution over struggle? What actual plans are coming out of this? And crucially, what hurdles are still in the way? For you listening, what can this Uijeongbu story tell us about tackling problems that just feel, well, impossible?
Okay, so let's really cement that barrier first. The sources are clear. When the U.S. military hands back the land, it doesn't just become city property ready to go.
Right, you said Ministry of National Defense.
Exactly. It goes back to national ownership. So the city, wanting to develop it, has to act like any other buyer.
Purchasing land from the central government.
Correct. And the price is set by appraisal, leading to figures like that 1 trillion estimate for CRC. Now, there is a law meant to help.
Okay.
The Support for USFK Garrison Area Special Act. But the sources say its support is really, really limited.
How so?
Well, it might cover up to 80% of the land cost, but, and this is key, only for very specific public uses, think basic infrastructure like parks or roads.
Not for broader development.
Yeah.
Or the full purchase price.
Precisely. It doesn't cover the whole purchase, especially if the city wants to do something else with the land. And crucially, it doesn't touch the development costs, the Uijeongbu, the money needed to actually build things. That's huge too.
So even if they get that 80% for a park, they still need to find the other 20% of the purchase price, plus all the money to actually build the park.
That's the situation. The bulk of the financial load for buying and building still lands on the local government.
Which, as we said, doesn't have deep pockets.
Right. So the sources call the situation practically impossible for development. It leads straight to that structural dilemma. Valuable land just sits there, unused, a missed opportunity.
And you mentioned this isn't just Uijeongbu's problem.
No, not at all. It's a common story in areas across South Korea with return bases. What should be a catalyst for growth becomes this massive financial weight.
Okay. So, faced with that reality, the Uijeongbu citizens go for contribution over struggle. How did that actually start? Who kicked it off?
The sources point to a group called the Uijeongbu U.S. Base Return Area Citizen Participation Committee. They seem to be a key organizing force.
Right.
And their first really visible move was that plogging event we mentioned at Camp Red Cloud.
The trash pickup.
Yep, it brought together members of a specific CRC volunteer group and other ordinary citizens. But it wasn't just about tidying up.
There was a philosophy behind it.
Definitely. The source is, quote, one of the leaders, Uijeongbu, from the Citizen Committee, he basically said, look, getting these bases back fully, making them useful, it's not going to happen just through struggle or protest as in the past.
So a deliberate shift away from older tactics? That's interesting.
Very much so. He laid out the idea. It is important for citizens themselves to contribute and serve as the owners of this land,
Okay.
showing through action that we have the qualification and justification to cultivate this space. He specifically talked about needing cooperation over conflict, integration over division.
Wow.
Wow.
That's reframing it completely. It's not just demanding something. It's demonstrating worthiness, demonstrating readiness, like saying, we're prepared to take care of this.
Exactly. And another leader, Shin Mi-hye, from the CRC volunteer group,
Yeah.
she echoed that. She described the plogging, even though it's a small practice, as being ultimately about caring for the land we live on and taking care of our community. Her belief, according to the sources, is that when such movements accumulate, a just transition is finally possible. It's about building momentum through these consistent, visible actions.
And the sources mentioned the citizens themselves felt pride in doing this, like actually participating in the process.
Yeah, there are quotes about people feeling good, making the area cleaner, wanting to be part of the land, coming back to them. And what's really telling is the description of the event itself. People talking, laughing.
So it wasn't just work, it was community building.
Absolutely. This kind of collective action, even something seemingly small, starts to build a consensus on the ground. It's a quiet but really effective way to assert, hey, this land belongs to us, the citizens, even before any legal papers are signed. It builds social capital, legitimacy.
Okay, so it's more than symbolic. It's about building that community muscle, that public claim. How does this energy then get channeled into, like, a concrete plan, a roadmap?
Right, so this grassroots energy then feeds into something more structured. The sources talk about public-private government collaboration, This collaborative framework is where the planning happens.
Public, private, government.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of cooks. What are the main goals the Citizen Committee is pushing for within that structure?
They have two big ones, according to the sources. First, and this directly attacks that trillion-won wall, is pushing for a new special law.
Okay.
A law that would mandate the free transfer of this return land from the national government straight to the city. No purchase necessary.
Whoa. Okay, that would be a game changer.
Totally. Their second big goal is about process. They want to activate public forums, discussion platforms, ways to make sure that the citizens' will is genuinely reflected in whatever development plans emerge.
So no backroom deals. Make it transparent and participatory.
That's the idea. Prevent decisions being made only by officials or politicians.
And what about the mayor? Is the city government on board with this citizen effort?
The sources suggest Mayor Kim Dong-gin is supportive. He's apparently done things like open parts of CRC so people can actually see the potential. And he's publicly calling for national government support, talking about creating like a design park that blends history and culture.
Okay, so you have the citizens pushing, the mayor amplifying. But how does this actual collaboration work? Public-private government. Getting Gyeonggi Province, Uijeongbu City, the Citizen Committee, experts, residents, the national government, all talking. That sounds tough.
It definitely sounds complex. The sources describe a process involving things like policy councils and joint workshops. They literally bring representatives from all those groups into the same room.
To hash things out?
Yeah, to discuss the development direction, what legal changes are needed, how the land could be used publicly, how to maybe attract private investment. It's an attempt to build a shared roadmap across all these different interests.
So if we kind of synthesize what the sources are saying, Uijeongbu's approach seems to have three main pillars.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. First, you've got the grassroots movement. That's the plogging, the community engagement, building that base level consensus. This land is ours.
Right, building the social foundation.
Second is the public-private government collaboration. That's the structured negotiation and planning part, using those councils and workshops to create the actual blueprint.
The mechanism for deciding what to do.
And the third pillar is the political and institutional strategy. That's the focused push for the big systemic fix, getting that special law for free transfer enacted.
So it's working from the ground up, across the middle, and at the top all at once.
Pretty much, it's a multi-level strategy.
It sounds really coherent, really thoughtful. But, as you flagged earlier, the sources don't pretend it's easy. There are still major challenges.
Oh, absolutely. The biggest one, the elephant in the room, is still the money. That 1 trillion one figure for CRC keeps coming up. Unless that special law passes, the default is still the city having to buy the land.
And the current support system is just not enough.
Exactly. It's too limited in scope, doesn't cover the full purchase or development costs. So getting that law changed is absolutely make or break.
Okay, so the financial hurdle is number one. What else? You mentioned juggling interests.
Yeah, that's the other huge one. Stakeholder conflicts. Trying to align what citizens want, what the local government needs, what the national government, especially the Ministry of Defense, which owns the land, is willing to give, what politicians promise, and what private investors might be looking for.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It's incredibly complex. Plus, you layer on issues like, should development rules be relaxed? How much environmental protection is needed? How do you actually make the area attractive for businesses? It's a tangled web.
Okay, complex web, huge financial barrier. How do the sources suggest they navigate this? What are the proposed solutions?
Well, the most direct is just keep hammering away at the free transfer and law amendment.
Yeah.
Constant advocacy, political pressure, making the case for 100% national support and that legal change for free transfer. The sources say this legislative push is active and ongoing.
Don't give up on the special law. Got it.
Right. Then there's a real emphasis on expanding and deepening the collaboration and citizen participation. The sources use this term shared property. Gogyuji. The idea is, if this land is truly shared, then citizens can't just be consulted after the fact.
They need a real seat at the decision-making table.
Exactly. Their voices have to be integral to the choices made, not just, window dressing. Uijeongbu is quoted again, emphasizing that politics and government must reflect the citizens' will here.
So making that public part of public-private government really means something.
Precisely. Then there's the call for just more practical support. Increased financial aid and regulatory easing, basically asking the national government for more money for land purchase and infrastructure beyond the current tight limits, and also making it easier to develop by easing regulations like development zone restrictions. Some progress on that seems to be happening, apparently.
So more money, fewer rules.
Yeah.
Seems sensible. What about the vision for the land itself?
There's a strong focus on publicness and sustainable development. The sources stress the need for a long-term plan, one that carefully balances the public good parks, community facilities with economic growth and environmental protection.
A triple bottom line sort of thing.
Kind of, yeah. And crucially, this plan shouldn't be cooked up by just officials or experts. It needs to be created and implemented through a body where citizens, administrators, experts, and politicians all work together continuously.
So the practical steps are push the law, get the budget, make phase plans, but always guided by these core principles.
Exactly. And those guiding values coming through in the sources are things like real citizen participation, genuine collaboration, transparent processes, building trust, and boosting the area's economic and cultural value. They're thinking broadly, too. Education, culture, tourism, welfare, environment, not just shocks and houses.
It's a holistic vision for community development, really.
It is. And the sources basically say, look, the true results of this whole collaborative effort will only show up if the discussions about public benefit and economic activity genuinely involve everyone, citizens, government, experts working together. That's where the legitimacy and success lie.
What strikes me here, what's really fascinating, is how this whole thing, from picking up litter to lobbying for national laws, seems built on this bedrock of citizen action, collaboration, and transparency. It's aiming for something sustainable that reflects the community it's meant to serve.
It's a huge, ambitious effort, no doubt. But that shift in approach from just confrontation to this active work-contributing stance, that's a really standout feature of the Uijeongbu story described here.
Okay, so let's recap. We started this deep dive with this image.
Yeah.
Incredibly valuable land in Uijeongbu, potential game changer, but locked behind this near impossible financial wall, the 1 trillion won problem. And then we saw this really unexpected, almost inspiring response from the citizens. Not just anger, but choosing contribution and service as their starting point.
Yeah, and we unpacked how that first step, like the plogging, wasn't just symbolic. It's woven into a multi-pronged strategy. building community ownership on the ground, fostering this complex public-private government collaboration for planning, and pushing hard for that critical institutional change, the special law for free land transfer.
Right, so here's where it gets really interesting. Thinking beyond just this one case, consider this effort in Uijeongbu. It starts incredibly small people picking up trash on land they don't even own yet, just to demonstrate care and build solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
Could this kind of approach, this focus on contribution, on building social capital first, combined with determined, structured collaboration, actually be a blueprint? A new way for communities everywhere facing these huge, expensive fights over shared public spaces?
It's a powerful question.
I mean, is it possible that these consistent, visible acts of citizen stewardship, even the small ones, could build enough leverage to eventually overcome massive financial barriers and political inertia? What does this story make you think about the potential, or maybe the challenges, for similar spaces in your own community?